My mother wants to get rid of me and my family, all for the sake of her golden child. For some context, I am the youngest of 6 children. My siblings, in descending order of age, are Dana, who is 43, Raina, 39, Karen, 38, Joe, 36, and Sharon, 35. Then there's me, 34. My mother always wanted more children, but circumstances forced her to stop with me, a reality that she lamented but rarely expressed directly. Despite being the youngest, my childhood wasn't cushioned with the love and care one might expect for the baby of the family. Instead, I became the object of jealousy and disdain from 2 of my sisters, Karen and Sharon. Their animosity often felt palpable, like a heavy fog that clouded our household. Sharon and Karen made my life miserable from as far back as I can remember. Their bullying wasn't just casual sibling rivalry, it was unrelenting and cruel, designed to humiliate me in front of anyone who would watch. From my parents to strangers, they found ways to ridicule me and make me feel small. It wasn't just physical pranks or verbal taunts, though there were plenty of both. It was the psychological games that hurt the most. They chipped away at my confidence, reducing me to a nervous wreck whenever they were around. I would often wonder why they targeted me so mercilessly, what I had done to earn their ire, but answers never came. My parents didn't help matters. In fact, they exacerbated the situation. They dismissed my cries for help as childish whining or an inability to toughen up. My mother often said that enduring their antics would make me stronger, as though strength was measured in scars. My father, on the other hand, offered no sympathy, his disdain for intervening in our lives glaringly evident. "You'll always need your sisters," they would say. But what they failed to understand was that these weren't the kind of sisters one could rely on. They were more tormentors than allies, and their cruelty carved lasting wounds into my psyche. Karen, nearly 5 years my senior, had a particularly spiteful way of asserting her dominance. She had a habit of going after any boy I expressed even the faintest interest in. It didn't matter to her that she was older, or that these boys were closer to my age. What mattered was asserting her control, proving that she could take what I wanted simply because she could. My crushes were never private for long. Somehow, she always found out and turned my feelings into a weapon against me. What hurt the most was that my mother allowed it, brushing it off as harmless or even amusing. Sharon's tactics were different, but no less painful. She relished in public humiliation and targeted my social standing with laser precision. By spreading lies about me to classmates, she ensured that I had no friends, no confidants to lean on. Even the teachers, influenced by the rumors she sowed, seemed to hold a certain disdain for me. I became the outcast, the girl everyone whispered about. My isolation at school mirrored the loneliness I felt at home, creating a sense of despair that followed me like a shadow. By the time I reached 7th grade, the bullying had escalated to a breaking. Sharon and her friends took things to horrifying new levels, orchestrating a public humiliation that still makes my stomach churn to think about. They stole my underwear and spread it out across the school grounds, a mortifying display that felt like the world's cruelest joke. They hoisted my bra up the school flagpole, scribbled on it accusations that I stuffed my chest, and left me to face the aftermath. For 3 excruciating days, I endured an unending barrage of mock. Tissue paper rained down on me in the hallways as my classmates hurled insults and laughter in my direction. My breaking point came in a moment of raw defiance. When another classmate tried to accuse me of stuffing my bra, I snapped. In a surge of anger and desperation, I lifted my shirt and exposed my chest for everyone to see. It was a drastic move, one that shocked the entire school. But in that moment, I didn't care about consequences. The humiliation was already unbearable, and this was my way of saying, enough. Yet, even that act didn't stop the torment. The damage to my reputation was already done, and the scars of that day lingered long after I moved to a new school. The bullying didn't end with the change of schools, though. At home, the double standards were glaringly apparent. Karen and Sharon were granted freedoms and privileges that I could only dream. Friends came and went from our house freely. For them, at least. I, however, was forbidden from having anyone over. It was as if the rules only applied to me. Karen didn't even live with us at the time, yet her friends seemed to have more access to our home than I did. When I was 16, my world turned upside down once again. My mother was sent to jail, and I had to move in with my father. Sharing a room with Karen and Sharon was nothing short of a nightmare. Even sleeping arrangements were a testament to how little I mattered. While my sisters claimed the bed, I was relegated to a lazy boy recliner in the corner. For over a year, that chair became my makeshift bed, a stark reminder of my place in the family hierarchy. 2 months before my 17th birthday, Karen moved out, leaving a void that my father quickly filled with demand. He turned me into his personal Cinderella, piling chores onto my already overburdened shoulder. When I graduated high school, I looked forward to a fresh start, a chance to escape the toxic environment I had endured for so long. But even that hope was dashed. My father informed me that if I wanted to continue living with him and his girlfriend, I would need to pay $1,000 a month in rent, a staggering amount for an 18-year-old just starting out in life. Joe and Sharon, who also lived at home, were only required to pay $400 each. Karen, who had dropped out of high school at 16, had never been asked to pay a dime. On to the present day. I have not spoken to Karen in over a year, but my relationship with Sharon had remained relatively intact, if tenuous, until recent. Despite our history, I clung to the idea that, deep down, there was still a chance for reconciliation with at least one sibling. Sharon and I spoke almost daily, sharing stories about our lives, our children, and the little things that made up the monotony of everyday life. It felt, for a time, like a fragile truce between two people bound by blood but scarred by a shared past. That fragile peace began to unravel when Sharon approached me with a proposition. She wanted to take my oldest daughter, 12 years old, to Montana for the summer alongside her two daughters, who are 5 and 2. The idea of my daughter going on a trip like that should have been exciting, a chance for her to make memories with her cousins. But the scars of last year's Disneyland debacle were still fresh in my mind. Last year, Sharon had made similar plans with my daughter, who had eagerly packed her bags and prepared for an unforgettable adventure. I even paid for my daughter's ticket and ensured she had access to her own money through a debit card she earned working as a dog sitter and house. At the last minute, though, Sharon called and told her that plans had changed. My daughter was devastated, left sitting with her bags packed while Sharon went to Disneyland with Karen's daughter instead. She even used the ticket I had purchased for my daughter, claiming it was a gift to my niece because she was the same age as Sharon's oldest. When I confronted Sharon and asked for reimbursement, she flatly refused, dismissing it as though my daughter's heartbreak was a mere inconvenience. I let it slide at the time, unwilling to ignite another family feud, but I made it clear that I was not comfortable with Sharon making plans with my children anymore. Predictably, my daughter refused to see Sharon this summer, a decision that Sharon did not take lightly. Sharon began throwing fits, accusing my daughter of being selfish for refusing the Montana trip. The irony of her complaints was not lost on me. How could she call a 12-year-old selfish for protecting herself from further disappointment? I stood firm, telling Sharon that if she didn't want my daughter to feel this way about her, then she shouldn't have put her in that position to begin with. It was as simple as that. Despite this tension, Sharon and I continued to talk daily, until 2 weeks ago, when things took a dark. I had called Sharon to ask if she could send my mother back to our home state. My brother Joe and his wife were expecting their first child, and Joe desperately wanted Mom to be there for the birth. To my surprise, Sharon refused outright, stating that Mom was staying at her house because she was visiting friends in Kansas. Sharon, who was on a 2-month vacation, claimed her plans took precedence. Frustrated, I called her selfish, and that was all it took to shatter whatever thread of civility we had left. The conversation devolved into a torrent of cruelty. Sharon screamed at me, telling me to hurt myself and insisting that no one would care if I died. She went further, claiming my children would be better off without me, and told me to put a gun to my head and pull the trigger. Then, as if that weren't enough, she hung up and called the police, fabricating a story that my husband had a gun to my head and was threatening to kill me. What followed was a nightmare. The police arrived at my home, detaining my husband while they investigated Sharon's claim. My neighbors, who adore my family, quickly came to our defense, providing statements that refuted Sharon's lies. Still, the ordeal was humiliating. Sharon even claimed I was waving a gun at my neighbors, forcing the police to evaluate whether I was a danger to myself or others. When they learned where I worked, a group home for mentally unstable teenagers, they realized how ludicrous her accusations were. The police eventually cleared me of all allegations, even offering me free concealed carry training as a gesture of goodwill. The damage, however, was done. My mother sided with Sharon, believing her lies and dismissing my side of the story. She even accused me of selfishness when I asked her again to return home for Joe's sake. Feeling defeated, I hung up on her, only to send a text later saying, "I'm sorry I'm not your golden child, but your son needed you, and you're playing this game. This means you've lost all contact with me and my daughters." I pointed out how hurt Joe was that she prioritized babysitting Sharon's 30 cats over being present for the birth of his son. Joe hasn't spoken to Mom since she left to stay with Sharon, and I can't blame him. He had tried to hold out hope that she would return, only to be met with broken promises. Meanwhile, Raina and the rest of the family insisted that Sharon and Mom were just worried about my children. Despite the fact that the CPS report was closed, the police found no wrongdoing, and my life is thriving. I even received a promotion at work, where my boss, a wonderful mentor, understands my family history and supports me unconditionally. I've gone no contact with my mom and all of my sisters, a decision that feels both liberating and fraught with guilt. My aunts and cousins have bombarded me with messages, calling me selfish for cutting ties with Mom and insisting she's just trying to help Sharon. I can't help but laugh at their accusations. What about Joe? What about me and the rest of her children? Mom's devotion to Sharon has left the rest of us in the dust, and I'm tired of pretending otherwise. For the first time in my life, I'm choosing myself and my children over the toxic dynamics of my family. The peace I've found in this decision is immeasurable, even if it comes at the cost of relationships I once hoped to mend. My children deserve a mother who is whole, not one weighed down by the trauma of the past. So no, I don't think I'm selfish for drawing this line. If protecting my mental health and my family makes me selfish, then so be it. For now, I'll focus on the life I've built, one filled with love, growth, and the promise of a brighter future.